Welcome everybody, and thank you all for taking the time out of your day to join us this afternoon. My name is Mark Hudson, and I'll be one of your hosts today, along with Donald McCormick. At the moment, all attendees are in listen-only mode, and we're live on Zoom as well as YouTube. We're recording this live event, and this will be available to you all later today. We'll have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation, and I also encourage you to use the question, answer, and chat panels in the web, in Zoom, and also on YouTube during the session, as I'll be able to collate the questions for later and even respond directly within the chat. There's also a couple of polls that we'll ask if you're viewing on Zoom. On the 31st of December 2020, Adobe will stop all support for Flash, and SAP will officially end of life their Xcelsius and SAP Dashboard products. This will mean your Xcelsius and SAP Dashboards will no longer be supported, but more importantly, will no longer be viewable by your users. But this is no ordinary end of life. Donald will explain more about the end of life of Flash and the implications it's going to have on your Xcelsius and SAP Dashboard users during the presentation. So without further ado, please let me introduce you to Donald McCormick. Donald has held senior roles at Crystal Decisions, SAP Business Objects, Clare Mail, and Antivia. He is now the Chief Strategy Officer here at Squirrel 365. Donald, over to you.
Mark, thanks very much, and welcome everyone to today's webinar. As Mark said, one of the things we're going to quickly look at is the end of life of Flash and what that means for Xcelsius and SAP Dashboard. So end of life is the end of this year, which is 4.5 months and counting. And as Mark said, it's like an end of life like no other. I mean, in fact, it's probably the most aggressive end of life a software product has ever seen, although it's been a long time coming since Steve Jobs famously refused to have Flash on the iPhone, which was the beginning of the end. And as Mark said, you just have to look at the statements that some people are, or the main people are making in this marketplace about the end of life to realize it's a significant deal. So at the bottom here, Microsoft and Google are basically saying none of the browsers are going to support it. So as of the end of this year, midnight on the 31st of December, it's all, and you can try and run Flash in a browser, it won't be there, and so you won't be able to run it. But even if you do have Flash Player installed on your machine, actually what Adobe done, they sort of put a kill switch in there, and so Flash-based content is going to be blocked from running in Adobe Flash Player. And I've tried this, and if as an interesting experiment, if you take your system date and put it to 2021 sometime, and then try and run SAP Dashboards or Xcelsius, it basically doesn't work. It still fires up, but you get various icons saying, actually, this isn't going to run anymore. And all of this is what has led SAP to talk about what's going to happen. So they're clearly not going to support it, but they're saying you may not be able to launch SAP Business Objects Dashboards, and in fact, if you're just sort of a normal machine, then you won't be able to create new dashboards, open existing ones. And because the designer, the Xcelsius SAP Dashboards designer, relies on Flash, even if what you're doing is it's generating HTML out of your designer, you won't be able to update that. You won't be able to fix issues or things, because you won't be able to re-export it, because you need Flash to be able to do that inside the designer. So it really is the hardest end of life that there's ever been for a software product. And so you really, if you have content from either of these products, you need to think about what you're going to do. And so what I want to do today is to persuade you that Squirrel is a good place to go for that content, to migrate it across. And you'll be glad to know that all we're going to do here today is demonstrations to help you understand that. So these demonstrations will go through some of the features. They're basically demonstrations to answer all the questions that you might have. Well, what if, and does it, and should it, and will it, and all this sort of thing. But at the same time, not just show you sort of like for like, but show you some nice new stuff as well that you won't have seen before. So it'll be fun from that point of view as well. And so the rest of the presentation really is just all about demonstrations inside Squirrel, seeing what you can do. And it will be a fast-paced demonstration, because you guys, because you're on this call, because you have the existing content, you understand the concepts here. There's no need to dwell on them. So I will be showing you at a high pace what you can do with Squirrel, both now and sort of some things into the future. So with that, let's open up the Squirrel Designer. So this is a Squirrel Designer. If you're used to SAP Dashboards and Xcelsius, it'll be very familiar. Although it's a different look and feel, it does all the same things that you would normally expect. So what I'm going to do is here, I'm going to import a spreadsheet, normal XLSX file. I'm going to import the regional sales, and here we have inside the designer, and it really is based on these 4 numbers for Q1 quarterly sales for North, South, East, and West. Everything else is total here, totals along the bottom, and then these are driven by growth rates, just by the overall growth, just grows everything, and then these differential growth rates grow North, South, East, and West differently, just to give us something interesting to go after. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to build a little sort of squirrel project based on this just to show you that it does exactly the sort of things that you would expect a good sort of replacement is going to do. So the first thing I'm going to do is add a column chart here. Now, lots of properties here. I'm going to do a few things here, put a manual scale on it. So it's going to go up to 1,000. Maybe take off the title. I'm going to take off the title on the x-axis as well, so there we go there. And then I can start binding into the spreadsheet. So I want a quarterly sales total there to put up here. I might put that in the middle. I don't want the subtitle there. And then I can start binding the data. So I come in here and I'm going to bind the values into this set of data here. And immediately we see it, as you would expect, inside the bar chart, column chart. And I can, it's not the way around I want to do it by quarters along the bottom, so I switch the data layout, and there I have my first visualization. I'm going to also add a pie chart here. Again, I'm going to make a little sort of tweak that. I'm going to turn off the labels there, and then start to bind it. So I'll bind this into, this is going to show me the total for the various regions. And again, I don't want a subtitle. And now again, I can bind the data. I'm going to bind the values here. Oh, wrong ones. Bind those values, and then bind the labels to give me North, South, East, and West. So there we have those there. So I've got, as you might expect, the ability to bind data from the spreadsheet into the visualization, so you can see that. Not that interesting either for anyone coming to this new, or someone coming to it with an Xcelsius or SAP Dashboards point of view. Let me just put this title also in the middle for neatness sake. But obviously, the spreadsheet, the brain at the middle, is the interface between sort of input and output. And so what I can do now is start to wire up some of these inputs here that are going to affect the model to some controls that give the user the ability to change those. Now, normally I'd have to scroll down here, but one of the nice things to find out how much real estate I have, but one of the nice things you can do, which is new to Squirrel, is I can now sort of zoom and see in the browser. I can zoom in and zoom out of my canvas. So here I'm going to add in a couple of sliders. The first slider is just going to control the overall growth rate, and the, oh, sorry about that, and then the second slider is going to control, I'm just going to control the northern growth rate through that one there. So there we go there. Now I have something that's interesting. Now, come as no surprise to any of you that when I preview this, what's going to happen is I move this, and my overall growth rate doesn't change the proportions in the pie chart. But if I move that, then you can see that the north is growing. So there I have a sort of a typical sort of interactive visualization based on not just the data, but the formulas in the spreadsheet. And obviously it goes further than that. We might want to sort of add a KPI tile to this. So what I'm going to do is add in here a formula which is going to be equal to total sales, and then G7 is the cell that I want there. So I've now got total sales is 3530, and so I can now bind that into a text label here. So I'm going to bind that into that value there. And obviously we want to style it. I'm going to make it much bigger, make the text color, make it stand out. So I'm going to make it white on black. So we can do that down there. So now I've got a KPI tile. And one of the great things here is, like, I've got complete flexibility. This text is just a function in Excel, so I can do what I want. And it's sort of, but you guys know all of this sort of thing. So now if I preview this, then I have the ability to move this, and my total sales KPI moves at the same time, just because I've designed it around the same spreadsheet. So all good and well there. That's the first set of things. But then one of the things, the question is going to come at the end as well. We do a lot of dynamic visibility in our content. So do you do that as well? So absolutely. So let's have a quick look at that. I'm going to go back to my full screen here, maybe move these down a little to make way for a menu. So I'm going to add in a label-based menu at the top. and I'm going to have that horizontal. Now this is going to show me the bar chart or the pie chart, so I need those labels in here, and then it's going to, as is the way that you would expect, it's going to write into a, I just write into, I don't know why that's not working there. Anyway, so it's going to write into that cell there in order to be able to tell me which label has been selected. So I'm going to bind these labels to the pie and the bar. So I've got those there, and then I'm going to say I want my data insertion. I want to take the label, and I'm going to insert that into that cell there. So I'm going to do that there. Now, actually, one more thing I'm going to do. I'm going to say that the selected item, so the default selected item, is going to be the bar, so that I have something when I come on. Now, all I need to do is to wire up the dynamic visibility of my components. Every single component in Squirrel has dynamic visibility capability. So I'm going to say I'm going to make that that status, and then that's the bar chart. So when it's bar, I'm going to show that, and then for let's put these away to give us a little space, and then so again when this is there, then I'm going to say that's the pie. And so now if I preview, we see the pie is there, the bar is there, but if I click there, pie. So dynamic visibility, as you would expect, and probably this sort of excuse me, the sort of thing we do there is make those the same size, just like that, and then make them centered, and so they're on top of each other. So there we go. Now we've got, it's much more. So you do that, and still everything is still obviously, as you might expect, interactive, so that you don't see that slider working except on the pie. So you do that there, and so everything is working there. So that we could quickly put together, so based on the spreadsheet, KPI indicator, sliders affecting the values, some visualizations, and sort of a label-based menu, and giving me the dynamic visibility here. So once we've got that, we can then export it. And so what you'll see is I've got a little catalog here of Squirrel projects, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to publish out to this from my here. So I just say export, and it's going to export this as a web app to my demo content, and I'm going to call this webinar. Yeah, I've misspelled it, but that just shows that it's true, that I'm really doing it now. So if I export this now, that's exporting it out to that little website that I've got. So when that is finished, if I come back to my here and refresh, what we'll see is that there I've got webinar, and then if I click on this, then I get the dashboard that we saw from before. So everything you've got there. So and all that's required to view that is the link and a browser. So we're absolutely no dependency on Flash or any other software at all. So that's the first sort of baseline, if you like, for the way in which Squirrel works and the way that it interacts with the spreadsheet. But then obviously there are many other things that you would normally do in Dashboards or Xcelsius. And so we're going to go a little further with another set of data here. We come back to my webinar directory and take regional products. So what I've got here is I've got a set of data that I'm going to filter. So obviously the data I had before was just that data being rendered in visualizations and then manipulated. But here, if I copy and paste this over here, what we're going to do is take this region here, and I'm going to visualize it just as a table. It's quick and easy to do that. Don't want the automatic column formatting, so we can see all of that nice and there. So we leave it like that. There we go. So we've got that there. Now what I want to do is, that's obviously showing the north. I want it to show the west, the south, the east, or the north, depending on what I select. So I'm going to do that with a drop down. So I'm going to add a drop down in here, and again, something you'll be very familiar with. If I take these labels as the labels for the drop down, it's going to sort out all the, making sure you get a distinct list of all of those. And then I'm going to take rather than doing a series insertion, I'm going to take filtering rows. I can take that source there, and then the destination is going to be this set here. And so now if I preview this, then you'll see that as I go, it's filtering the data north, south, east, and west. So just as you might expect from a drop-down component in the other previous products, works exactly the same way here. However, a nice extra that you get in Squirrel are these new functions in here, particularly this data mover one, because in Xcelsius or SAP Dashboards, one of the things, if you wanted to do this but didn't want to drive it from a drop-down, you maybe want to drive it from other interface, you would have to have drop-downs or other selector components and hide them, and it made the interface that much more, well, the end user didn't see it because you were hiding them, but the design interface much more concave. But here we've got the data mover component we can add in here, which does all the things that you saw there. So I can do filtered rows, and again I can drive that from something happening in the sheet, so it's not cluttering up my UI. And we've got plans for many more components that will work in this sort of UI-less way to move data around and do things like that. The ones that we have at the moment, we've got the data mover, we have external parameters, which allows you to take inputs in from the surrounding web environment, or indeed pass values back out. I know I was talking to someone who was wanting to do a pricing calculator inside Salesforce, and they wanted to take data in from Salesforce and then put it out at the end once the pricing calculator done, which was quite a nice use. And then also the ability to export data to Excel and to PDF. And again, they don't need to be tied to a button. You can tie it to a button, but you can do it to other things. So it's nice to have them here in a sort of UI-less way. So that's so it's data. These functions are a nice new addition that Squirrel brings to the table. But then the question here is, what happens if I don't have this data in here? So I'm starting with that, and my data is coming from externally, because typically we want to take one of these projects and fill it with data at runtime from a different source. And as you would expect, we have the ability to do that, and we have a number of connection types here, and it's all the ones you would expect if you were looking to take your existing projects and move them over. So we have the ability to connect to BI Web Services query as a web service. We have an XML connector, a CSV connector. We also have a database query. You can write back to the database, and we also have some caching capabilities. And for the database and the caching, obviously for the SAP one, you need a business objects backend. For these four here, you need the Squirrel data server, which is a low impact server you need to install as site of your database. And so what we're going to do is to use a database query here, and I'm going to go out to my little Squirrel server there. I've just got the name of it, so I don't have to type it. And then I'll log in there. So I log in, and I'm going to my demo database and pick my regional products, and I'm going to put them from that query into here. And I don't want to include the column headers because I've got it there. And so then if I run this, then what I get is nothing. Now, I know why there's nothing there, but often you'll do this in the real environment and say, why is there nothing there? And the next thing you would now do is, okay, so I better put tables on here to see if the data's come in from my database, so I don't, and it all sort of like work around debugging. Well, the great thing about Squirrel, and this really is a huge step forward, is you have this debug tab. So the preview is how it will appear when it's exported, but the debug runs it with the model running, but with the spreadsheet. So watch this, what happens here. If I click debug, it's going to run it, but with the model running in the dashboard. So this should fill with the data. So if I go here, then there I've got the data. So that's the result from the query. So I can now see the query without having to put extra tables on here to see my query results. I know what's going in here, but it's not filled here. And the reason is because I haven't got something selected in here. So I can select that. So now, but now you can see that I can see that it's not only in my visualization that I'm seeing this, but I can see what's happening in my table down here. And actually one of the things I want to do here is to stop that happening. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say selected item is going to be a label. So this is the default selected item. And I'm just going to take the first region that comes back. So now if I do this, it should all fire up, and hey presto, yes, it comes in with the data, and then it all works there. But that, I mean, it can save an enormous amount of time in debug. And actually the interesting thing is it's not just for data coming in like that. For example, if I come in here and I'm going to add in a slider, and that slider is just as an example is going to go into Q1, and then Q2 is going to be just that times 10, just to show you. So now if I run it in debug, I mean, obviously I get all the data that I had before, but if I run the slider, I can see what's happening in those cells. Those cells are updating. So it gives me real deep insight into what's happening in my spreadsheet, because and that visibility makes things so much easier to get right and to chase down issues that you might have. And while we're at it, sort of other things that make this easier, you'll notice that when I go from design to debug, so I'm there, I click, I'm in a running project. I'm in there. fraction of a second I'm in here. It's no sort of preview, compiling, initializing, and all that sort of stuff. It's just there and available. And even if I go into preview, it's really quick, and you're not waiting around. And the other thing is, if you notice, if I click on these, notice the property sheets. What are they missing? Well, I'll show you what they're missing. They're missing this here. So I come in here and put a little tongue-in-cheek. What they're missing is this infamous little initializing. So the property sheets you'll be used to before, when I go on there, you get this initializing in here, and it's only a quarter to half a second, but it sort of adds up and it makes the whole process that much slower. So we can get rid of that and just have this fluid interface, which does all those sort of great things over and above the ability to see and to peer into the spreadsheet as it's running. So it's a lovely experience to use and design with this. So the final thing I'm going to do here is, the final project in Squirrel I'm going to do is to show you a component which exists in Squirrel but didn't exist in Xcelsius SAP Dashboards, but actually gives a lot of flexibility, and that is the web view. And the web view allows you to take external content and bring it into Squirrel. And that external content can be another Squirrel model. So you can actually have cascading or embedded Squirrel models which are passing parameters between them, so you can use that to carve up different bits of the project to different people, or you can have dynamic loading of them so that you can so it sort of cuts down on the complexity, or you can have ones that are repackaged, and you might have a KPI tile that you've got in one and you're going to reproduce it across a number of them, because you can pass using that external component we talked about before, this external sorry, wrong one. The functions, the external parameters, you can pass data to and from Squirrel, other Squirrel content. It's really very powerful. But what we're going to do here is I've got a little URL here that's built up with just these two cells. So I'm going to, it's a Google search for something in something. So this, it currently says theatres in London. So if I just connect up that to there, what I should see is I should get a map. These are theatres in London, but I want to be able to now change that, or I want the user to be able to change that. So I'm going to add a drop down. The drop down is going to change my city, and it's going to insert its label into this destination here. And then I'm going to do another one, which is a radio button for my theatres or for my type of venue. So it's going to be theatres, gardens, or museums. And that is also going to insert, I'm going to insert the label, and that's going to be into here. The other thing I want to do is I want a selected item. So my selected item for that is going to be theatres. And for this, I'm going to have a selected item, which is the label of my current hometown, where I live, which is London. So now if I preview this, we've got the ability to navigate between the cities. I can even go to Cairo, look at museums in Cairo. It's amazing that it's just so quick to build this sort of thing. And we got the power of this other content that we've got here, because you've got a Google map in here, so you can have other content in here which is controlled seamlessly by the Squirrel infrastructure. So it's very quick to build this sort of thing and be able to do some really pretty cool stuff with it. So if I come back here, that's the end of the demonstration. Hopefully that's persuaded you that there's a real wealth of capability here that will take on your existing functionality and allow you to migrate it across. But and so we've got the new things we've got over and above just being able to bring across debug, great new feature, the canvas zoom so you can see what's going on, the fluidity of the interface, the new functions, the data mover, external parameters, and the web view. It really does extend what you can do here. But there's one other thing that I want to show you, which isn't in everything you've seen so far is in the product as it is today, but there's one thing I want to show you which is not yet in the product, but it's one of the things that used to be possible in Xcelsius, but is no longer really possible. And that's nothing to do, no fault of Xcelsius really, it's more to do with the other technology around it. And that is the ability to bring these sort of things into PowerPoint. But one of the things that we are keen to bring that back, because it's something we get asked sort of almost more than anything else, and it was just such a huge thing that people used to do with the product, to be able to do this interactively in front of people. And so if we I get rid of these because I want to show you it from the beginning. So what I've got here is PowerPoint, and we've got an add-in which is the Squirrel Viewer. So what I can do is I've got a cloud-hosted Squirrel model here, and if I click on there, it's going to load it from the cloud and bring it into my PowerPoint environment. And so what I see here is, and it's those of you who've been around a while will recognize this this dashboard. It's a clone of one that used to be used by the infomercial team to demonstrate Xcelsius. But this is not just an image. This is actually sort of live in design view and in PowerPoint. If I go to my full view, if I come up here and go to there we go. So I'm here. I am doing a presentation. I can switch between tables and what if. I've got this little thing here. I can maybe take the numbers off, put them on, change the default colors of here, maybe even change the title. I don't quite know why I want to do that. Oh, I can't spell. Oh, actually, I can't type. And so there we go. We got those there, and sort of so everything is running in there. The other one I want to show you here, because it's just amazing that it does it, is I'm going to add another one here, another viewer, and this time I'm going to add a more sort of dashboardy piece of content that we have here. And what's remarkable about this is this dashboard actually has got no data in at the moment, and the reason for that is because it's actually, it gets its data from a database. And so what we need to do is need to select something on here. So if I go into, I could select it from here, but I can also go into presentation mode here, go to my second page. If I now do this, that's now going to a database, getting data, bringing it into my Squirrel model inside PowerPoint and coming back. And so even here, if I I can add comments. So I can add a new comment in there, and that's actually being written back to a database. I can read and write to a database through a Squirrel model through PowerPoint. So you really are unlimited in what you can do. It's quite remarkable. So I wanted to show you, not there in the product yet, but coming in the next couple of months. So the final thing before I hand back to Mark is to say a little bit about migration. So you'll have a number of XLFs. XLFs can get enormously complicated. So there's no out of the box 100% migration capability, but we do have tools that can help us automate that process. They're not really suitable for wide distribution, so we really need to run them, but they can reduce migration effort of an XLF by 50 to 90% we've seen. Obviously the heart of your XLF is the Excel. When you've got the Excel, the rest is really just point and click adding in, but it can be really useful to be able to migrate the rest of the XLF as well. So we offer that as a service. If you get in touch with us or send us a sample XLF to get started, this is one on the right here from a chap that we converted over for him. If you go to his website, he's got 2 or 3 of these nice sort of carbon footprint calculators at futuremetrics.info, and those were all migrated across using this service. So if you want to see how one of your XLFs might migrate across, then we'd be happy to do that for you. Just drop us an email with that in. So with all of that said, and with a couple of minutes left, I will hand you back to Mark, so we can take any 1 or 2 questions that have come in.
Thank you, Donald. Excellent as ever. Yep, we've got quite a few questions that we can tackle in the in a couple of minutes that we've got left. So VJ has asked what kind of data sources can be connected to Squirrel? So
data sources, so you can connect to a CSV that's out on the website. If you've got some CSV capability on that you can deliver from a website, you can get into that. The databases, basically anything that you can get through ODBC, our database server will be able to get to. You can get to BI web services and queries a web service on the business objects platform, and you can also, if you have XML data, XML data streams can be read in as well. So quite a wide variety there.
Okay, great, thank you. And did you say there also that we support BI web services from SAP as well?
Yes, indeed.
Right, that was another question. Great, thank you for that, Donald. Lauren has asked, will the migration tool work after the 31st of December 2020?
Yes and no. So what we do actually, the tool that we have, as I say, it requires quite careful handling, but it takes the XLF itself, so it's not dependent on the Xcelsius or SAP Dashboards designer running. Having said that, sometimes what you need to do is you need to tweak it in the designer in order to make it suitable for migration. So I wouldn't bank on it. It's sound like all bets are off at the end of the year. So I would get things in sooner rather than later, because it really is a sort of a cliff edge end of life that we're happening with Flash, and wouldn't like anyone to say, oh, if only. I mean, there may be ways around it on a really sort of ad hoc basis that you wouldn't really want to do, but sort of I would do it sooner rather than later if possible.
Great, thank you. Nick, watching live on YouTube, has asked, is this a web-based application?
So yes, at the output of, so Squirrel itself, the designer, is installed on the desktop at the moment. We plan a web-based version that you can use as a cloud service in the future. So you have to install the Squirrel designer that you saw me using today on one machine, but what Squirrel produces is a web application. So what your users would be using is pure web HTML. It's actually HTML, JavaScript, and CSS, but you don't need to know that. It's just it delivers web capability that can be embedded inside other web content you have, or as you've seen into PowerPoint.
Okay, and finally, I think we've got time for just one more. It's a quick one from John. He's asked about what PowerPoint versions will be supported.
That's a good question. We're still, I mean, it basically is, in terms, there are two possible answers to that. So which type of PowerPoint? So it'll work in desktop PowerPoint, both Windows and Mac. It'll work on web-based PowerPoint, and it'll work on PowerPoint on say an iPad or on other devices. And that's because the new plugin architecture, the new add-in architecture allows us to do that. And so essentially it'll work in any modern PowerPoint environment that supports these new add-ins. And I don't know, I mean, most people are on Office 365, and sort of that will cover it. But like if you go back to 2013, PowerPoint 20, whether or not that would work or not, I don't know, I'm afraid. But basically any up-to-date version of PowerPoint it will work in.
Fantastic, great stuff. I think we've run over slightly, so thank you so much, Donald. Thank you all very much for attending this afternoon or this evening, depending where you are in the world. Thanks to all who are watching on the live stream on YouTube as well. As I said at the start of the presentation, this has been recorded. The recording will go out to all Zoom attendees. For those watching live on YouTube, if you email us at team@squirrel365.io and request a copy of the recording, we'll send that link out to you as well. Thank you all very much, and good evening.